Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sally Cabrosi, a junior student here at VCUQ, and it is an honor for me to present Catherine Asher. Catherine Asher is a specialist in Islamic art and Indian art from 1200 to the present. She is well known for her work on the architecture of the Mughal dynasty, as well as on the artistic patronage of their successors and predecessors. She has recently co-authored India Before Europe in 2006. The classes she teaches include Art of Islam, Age of Empire, Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals, Art of Islamic Iran, Diversity of Traditions, Indian Art, 1200 to the present, among others including graduate-level seminars. She just completed a term as the College Art Association Vice President for Publications, as well as a 10-year term as the Chair of the Committee on Art and Archaeology of the American Institute of Indian Studies. As for today, Catherine Asher will present to you about South Asia and how it had a sophisticated tradition over architecture associated with water as early as 2500 BCE. Many of the practices that developed during this time and later periods were inherited and adapted by Muslim rulers and patrons once they entered the Indian subcontinent. This paper seeks to explore these practices through two case studies. One is the architecture that is built under the North Indian Sultan Sher Shah Sur, who used this patronage as a legitimizing device. And the other one is the ritual traditions and architecture which developed at the South Indian shrine of the Sufi saint Shahul Hamid. Although the motivation behind the patronage of water architecture and the lure that grows around each figure are quite different, the use of water to promote public welfare, spiritual values, and maximize irrigation is common to each. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Catherine Asher.
Thank you very much. I, like everybody else, would like to thank all the organizers, the institutions, especially Jonathan and Sheila. I also want to acknowledge, though, the very generous help of one of the fellows, Riaz Latif, in spending time reading very poorly printed Urdu texts. Thank you, Riaz. Okay. Clean, potable water is something that all cherish, but both Islamic and Indic traditions have a reverence for water that is exceptional. In Muslim traditions, water, vital for life, is associated with divine grace, paradise, and spirituality. Indic traditions have long considered water sacred, and water management continued to be of great concern even before the advent of Islam. And I'm sorry, here we see a ritual bath dating to 2500 BCE, while this enormous relief of the 7th century promoted an extensive royal irrigation project. Water channeled via canals spilled over the edge of this monumental image of the descent of a great river, thus providing water for drinking, bathing, and irrigation. Water management systems involving various technologies were developed to serve India's diverse terrains and climatic conditions. Stepwells, known as baulis, originated in arid areas. These consist of a well that is attached to a series of steps that descend to the water level. Water architecture also included tanks with continuous steps that reach the water's edge. The power of water at religious sites is undeniable. In the Hindu context, bathing in sacred waters washes away sins as it cleanses the soul. In the Muslim context, water's power can also be construed as religious. Lore holds that while a 14th century sultan was building a massive fort, a renowned saint was also constructing a baoli at his khanga, and here's a view. The sultan's workers evidently would have rather worked for the saint. However, when the sultan came to know of this, he was furious. In turn, the saint cursed the sultan, predicting his imminent death. The story deals with the power of a saint whose authority caused the sweet-flowing waters to be completed, while the sultan's power was disrupted. Few baolis still function, but this one at the saint's shrine is actively used, a testimony to the saint's baraka. Even today, the water is considered effective in curing diseases and expelling evil spirits. For the rest of my time, I will discuss two traditions of water in India. One is the water architecture of the North Indian ruler Sher Shah Sur, whose patronage must be understood in the context of his larger political agenda. The other is the shrine of a saint, Shahul Hamid, on the south coast of India, the same area where the relief I showed had been carved. Sher Shah Sur, a sultan who ruled over much of North India in the mid-16th century, built for himself a tomb set in water. It is located in Sasaram in remote eastern India, although on a major trade route. In order to understand his patronage of water architecture, we need to keep in mind the origins of this monarch, his rise to power, and his determination to elevate his familial status. Sher Shah was unusual, for he arose from obscurity, lacking the customary high lineage to become Delhi's most powerful ruler since the mid-14th century. While he only ruled for 7 years, Sher Shah is known for his prolific architectural patronage, providing buildings and public works from the Punjab and modern Pakistan to Bengal in the east. For example, he constructed 4 major highways linking all North India, and here's a stretch of one with the original paving. He also built massive forts across his domain, which even the imperial Mughals found impressive. In the interior were wells, bawlis, and other catchment devices for water. He built his forts overlooking rivers that served as natural moats. He erected a citadel at Delhi, his capital. In this fort, Sher Shah built a mosque evoking architecture from Delhi's past, just as he reintroduced administrative measures used by Delhi's most successful rulers. The mosque's location makes reference to Sher Shah's royal status, for it overlooked the majestic Jamuna, although today the river has shifted far from its original course, and the greenery that you see indicates where the river once flowed. By locating his mosque in this way, he's equating himself with an important 14th century sultan, well known for his patronage of water architecture, who had placed his mosque and palace overlooking the same river. Sher Shah's mosque, overlooking the river, is at a site associated with the ancient Indian epic, the Mahabharata. Sher Shah uses this mosque in its riverside location to identify himself with both Indic and Muslim kings, paralleling his use of both Nagri and Persian scripts in his inscriptions. During this 7-year period, Sher Shah also provided for his subjects' welfare by building inns, kitchens to feed the poor, and especially bawlis and wells. According to texts on Indian kingship, well known in 16th century India, it is the obligation of a good ruler to provide for his subjects. Thus, Sher Shah's building program was clearly part of a carefully orchestrated propagandistic campaign designed to tout him visually as an ideal Islamic sultan rooted in an Indic past. The utilitarian nature of these works contrasts with the earlier Mughals' patronage of gardens whose access would have been limited to the elite. What fits less well at first glance into this orchestrated package are the 3 monumental tombs, one for his grandfather, one for his father, and another for himself, that this sultan built concurrently with the public works. The question we must ask is, why would a sultan, clearly concerned with promoting an image of himself as a king concerned with his subjects, squander resources on 3 enormous tombs? In 1542, Sher Shah built a square-plan tomb in Narnaul, about 100 kilometers southwest of Delhi, for his grandfather, Ibrahim Sur, an Afghan emigre horse trader and low-ranking noble. Narnaul had been Ibrahim Sur's landholding. The tomb, built of pink and gray stone, was the most refined one in the Delhi region. It's modeled on tombs built for high-ranking nobles, but it's much larger and more elaborate than its prototypes. This structure dominated the older adjacent tomb of a famous saint, which is here. Since the saint's shrine long been the site of pilgrimage, Narnaul attracted devotees, now doubtless as awed by Ibrahim Sur's imposing tomb as by the much more modest structure immediately to the south. Buried in such close proximity to the renowned saint, Ibrahim Sur, in accordance with Islamic tradition, is imbued with the saint's baraka. Moreover, the tomb served as a madrasa, underscoring its religious nature. Sher Shah built this tomb over his grandfather's grave shortly after he attained the Delhi throne in 1540. That was more than 50 years after his grandfather's death, a grandfather he never knew. It is unprecedented for a king to construct a tomb for a long-deceased relative. Rather, it's a practice limited to the provision of tombs and shrines for saints, notable since several features endow the tomb with a religious character. In much the same way as we shall see, Sher Shah also imbued the tomb of his father with many trappings of a shrine. Today, there's little indication that water was a feature of the tomb, although its location next to an important dargah, which has a well and water tank, suggests that encroachment by modern structures have obliterated its original water source. Another indication that it had a water source is the tomb's appearance, its facade and tall plinth, which draws on that of the nearby tomb of a Khwaja Khizr. This Khizr was not only the son of a high-ranking noble, but an influential saint in his own right. Moreover, his name evokes that of the Saint Khizr, who is associated with the water of life. While I suspect that once a water source was associated with Ibrahim Sur's tomb, any possible omission is more than compensated in the tombs of Sher Shah and his father Hassan Sur. If the tomb of Ibrahim Sur was cast as a glorified shrine, how might we interpret Sher Shah's own tomb as well as his father's at Sasaram? Sher Shah's monumental octagonal mausoleum is situated in the middle of an artificial lake. The tomb of Hassan Sur, the father, is also an octagonal tomb, although smaller than the Sultan's. These two tombs are modeled on royal tombs, but like Ibrahim Sur's tomb, are larger than any previous ones. Epigraphic evidence indicates that these tombs, like all other monuments constructed under Sher Shah's patronage, were provided during this intensive 7-year period of building activity. Sher Shah's tomb sits askew on its square plinth in order to align it in the direction of Mecca. Since architects knew how to properly determine the correct orientation of buildings, it's likely that the tomb sits in a pre-existing tank and on an already completed platform, originally intended for another purpose, just as Sher Shah had appropriated and renovated some older forts. The tomb Sher Shah built for his father Hassan Sur is situated in a walled compound. His octagonal mausoleum is a smaller version of Sher Shah's, but still considerably larger than its royal prototypes. Emphasizing the sacred, not royal, the compound recalls a saint's shrine. Contained within it is a large mosque and madrasa, each unusual in Indian tombs of this period. Just outside this wall is a deep tank, recalling step wells at major saints' shrines. The tank surely was intended to serve the public, thus the tomb becomes a public works project, not just a private mausoleum. While the actual mausolea of Sher Shah and Hassan Sur are close in appearance, their settings and by extension, the meanings implied by these settings are quite different. If Hassan Sur's tomb draws on Sufic prototypes, what is the source for Sher Shah's tomb that sits in a tank? I've already suggested that the tank and its plinth were pre-existing and were simply overtaken by Sher Shah, who found the site idyllic but the orientation wanting. I argue that its setting draws from both Islamic and Indic traditions. Not far from Sasaram is a major temple in the middle of a lake. While the current temple is new, an older structure surely stood in its place, for the lore about this site dates to the 6th century BCE. Indo-Islamic traditions include this 14th century tomb in Delhi, which was originally set in a pool of water. Just as the use of dual inscriptions on Sher Shah's coins indicates an attempt to reach out to India's diverse populations, so too his tomb's watery setting draws on both Indic and Islamic traditions. The tank at Sher Shah's tomb is a clear reference to Al-Kawthar, the heavenly fountain of spiritual rewards. This reference is specifically spelled out, for this very Quranic chapter is inscribed on the tomb's mihrab. Thus, Sher Shah constructed for himself a monument, which in the entire setting was intended to represent paradise, the world of eternity. However, I would also like to suggest that the tank filled through sluices channeled from a river, and the sluices are right here, some distance away, served as a public work project. The significance of this can only be grasped by understanding the local terrain, its general inability to hold groundwater, and the difficulty here of digging wells. To deal with this, a system of irrigation was developed using catchment basins at the end of relatively short canals from the Son River, allowing both for irrigation and the recharging of groundwater. This system had to be used collectively and only worked when planting, irrigation, draining, and harvesting of all crops in a single area were synchronized. When this territory was under a single strong administration, the system flourished. But when authority was broken among multiple groups, it fell into disarray, causing poor crops and even famine. The strong, centralized Sur regime would have assured the well-being of this system. The Sur's strength is further testified by the fact that the large tank, as well as the father's tomb, are able to maintain their constantly high water levels, rare for this part of India. The tomb setting thus has a practical and a symbolic meaning. Why was Sher Shah so concerned with imbuing his own tomb and that of his low-ranking predecessors with a meaning that enhanced their status? Sher Shah's rise to power was viewed as be'adab, a term indicating impropriety. For a man of his background to assume the title Sultan transcended codes of conduct established for Islamic princes. In these sources, high birth is often cited as a prerequisite for kingship, yet Sher Shah failed to meet this requirement. Sher Shah's patronage of tombs served to elevate his lineage by posthumously glorifying his deceased ancestors and thus indicating his suitability for kingship. Moreover, the tank in which the tomb is situated, as well as the tomb's octagonal shape, are symbols of paradise, that is, according to texts on kingship, the eternal reward of the just and pious ruler. This, together with the fact that at the time of its construction, it was the largest tomb in all India, suggests that the patron, the ruler himself, wished to be remembered as extraordinary. Sher Shah thus bestowed prestige upon his forebearers, albeit posthumously. Each tomb, by mere dint of its overall appearance, served to elevate the status of the Sur name, and by doing so created a legacy suitable for a king. That legacy created by these tombs is apparent even today may be gleaned from a sign placed in close proximity to the tomb of his father, Hassan Sur, and another before the tomb of Sher Shah's grandfather. These structures, erected by Sher Shah for his horse trader grandfather and his low-ranking father, are today identified by the Archaeological Survey of India as the tombs of Shah Ibrahim and Hassan Sur Shah. It is as if the survey, properly awed by the tombs and the meaning implied by them, bestowed upon Sher Shah's forebears the title Shah, which can either mean king or saint. They doubtless bought Sher Shah's message, for who but kings, who but esteemed saints, could have such magnificent tombs? Sher Shah, ruling over North India's inland, was concerned with how to ensure adequate water facilities. But those living along South India's Tamil coast often had the sea to consider, along with sweet water. We earlier saw the concern with controlling water under pre-Islamic kings who ruled over this same area. Now I will turn to one of South India's most revered Sufis, Shahul Hamid Nagori, whose shrine is located at Nagaur, once an important fort, and about here on this map. In the study of any Sufi saints, it's difficult to know where the line between historical fact ends and hagiography begins. And certainly this is the case with Shahul Hamid. After his initiation, Shahul Hamid traveled widely, including visiting Mecca and Medina, and here's a map of his journeys. He traveled by both land and water, crossing the Arabian Sea, the Red Sea, and perhaps the Indian Ocean as well, suggesting why even today, Shahul Hamid is the saint of choice to be invoked before, while, and after crossing the waters. Upon his return to India, he went south to spread the message of Islam. There he cured a Hindu king of a long-term malady, and here's an aerial view of his shrine. In thanks, the king donated a large stretch of land at Nagaur for his Kanga. Shahul Hamid died about 1560, and this much is probably historically accurate. A considerable lore has developed around Shahul Hamid, and in these accounts, we learn that when still in the fluid waters of the womb, he performed miracles. When young, he was visited by Khizr, associated with the waters of life, who placed saliva, which might be thought of as a watery substance, from his own mouth into that of the child to endow him with grace. Saliva associated with the saint's baraka again arrives when his son, a gift to a barren couple through betel nut the saint chewed and gave to the wife to consume, would ask for his real father and a toothbrush, the transmitter of baraka. He has many encounters with major figures of Islam. For example, his visits to the important shrines of Mashhad, Karbala, and Medina, some of these reached by water, grant the saint a pan-Islamic importance. He even visits Southeast Asia according to his hagiographies. We also learn of the many miracles performed by Shahul Hamid, especially those associated with his awesome curative powers, many of which do have to do with water. For example, in one account, a paralyzed boy is sprinkled with water from Shahul Hamid's alms bowl and is instantly able to walk. In another, a blind man is cured by water distributed by the saint. Shahul Hamid is also to transform salty water into sweet water, something that will be reenacted in the annual commemoration of his death anniversary. He turns a plate into a boat so he can cross a mighty river, makes rainfall to end a drought, and commands rivers to rise up to drown a band of jinns, among others. What's less common are texts that describe the 108 flowers that fell from the saint's mouth, which were like a garland of fragrant advices, suggesting a mouth of sweet liquid. And here we have a standard reference to the sweet-smelling words of a Muslim saint, and to 108, an auspicious number in the Indic tradition. Tamil poetry further enriches this tradition of liquid imagery by likening Shahul Hamid's grace to a rain-bearing cloud, pouring life-giving waters on withered plants. The poet further describes his shrine as lush with vegetation and red lotus-filled tanks. Moreover, Shahul Hamid is viewed by his followers as an ocean of grace, who calms and soothes like the cooling waters of the great tank at his shrine. The saint is also known as the son of Nagaur, and the poet claims that the sun in the sky has to dip its face in the ocean before it can gaze on Shahul Hamid. Devotion and ceremonial at the shrine differ from activity at most other Muslim ones, at least those in North India and other places I've visited in the Islamic world. Thus, an account of what one might encounter is useful. It is an experience that engages the senses. Color is apparent on the shrine's painted walls and roof, the supplicant's dress, and the hammered silver of the doors that gleam in the steady light of oil lamps. Smoke from burning coals also permeates the air. The smell of burning ghee, fragrant flowers, and incense assault the senses. Holy water wets the throat, while the constant repetition of prayers for the pilgrim's welfare are heard throughout the shrine, as are the cries of anguished children who are undergoing their first tonsure. This experience is quite unlike that encounter at the mainstream Muslim shrines of North India. It seems closer to the visit of a large South Indian temple. Tamil Nadu has not only a predominant Hindu population, but large Christian and Muslim ones as well, which interact with each other in remarkably positive ways. Islam in South India, especially in the context of a shrine, is much more likely to embrace Indic traditions than their North Indian counterparts. This is not to suggest that South Indian Islam is a diluted version of standard Islam, for many scholars of classical Islam have flourished in these very communities, but that long-standing Indic traditions have been widely embraced by South Indian Christians and Muslims, and examining the shrine itself will help to underscore this point. The shrine, established in the 16th century, has grown considerably over time. Today, its three most notable features are its multiple minarets, the area containing the tombs of Shahul Hamid and his descendants, and its enormous tank. Tanks are a common feature at a saint shrine, where they provide water for the public's benefit and are often associated with the saint's power. For example, the Delhi Sultan's interference with the construction of the Bawali at the saint's shrine is thought to have caused the saint king's death. I also noted a stepped tank at Hassan Sur's tomb in an attempt to give him a saint-like status, as well as the enormous tank at Sher Shah's tomb, evoking images of paradise. A small shrine not far from Nagaur features a tank similar to the one at Nagaur. However, the extraordinary size of the tank at Nagaur evokes comparisons with tanks at huge South Indian temple complexes. It's on the banks of the Nagaur tank, which is equated with the waters of Zamzam, where life cycle rituals, for example, tonsures, are performed. The newly shaved head is then anointed with cooling sandalwood paste made with the tank's water. Pilgrims also consume water from the tank, believed to have curative powers. The size of the Nagaur shrine's tank suggested it had control over considerable water sources, paralleling that of the great temples and churches of the area. To date, there's been no study of the land and water resources endowed by the Raja to Shahul Hamid. However, considerable work has been done on land rights of the great temples of this same region, and we can assume parallels exist. Temple complexes were the controllers of water and the economy. For example, the tank at a temple, and by extension church and or shrine, was and still is used for ritual and bathing. But under the control of these institutions were multiple smaller tanks that served to irrigate the land. Tamil Nadu is a drought-prone area, and without artificial irrigation through tanks, whose sluices are opened and closed at appropriate times, there could be no cultivation of rice, the main food staple in South India. Although the shrine's water management records have yet to be examined, recent studies of the irrigation organizations that manage the tanks today show that they have a well-balanced range of members belonging to various religions and castes, and so too, the manner in which the water is distributed is equitable. We can assume that not only did the huge tank at Nagaur serve personal and religious ritual, but also was a symbol of the shrine's economic and social control. The Nagaur shrine's interior consists of halls that converge on the entrances to the tombs themselves. And here the parallels with other Indic traditions are notable, including whole coconuts, with their fluid intact, known as coconut water, that hang from the ceilings as symbols of auspiciousness and fertility. Supplicants gather to take blessings from the shrine, the shrine's attendants, and on their behalf to ask favors of Shahul Hamid. Water also plays a role in the shrine's ritual. After the pilgrim has been blessed, the shrine's custodian then offers the supplicant holy water, and you can see the silver containers there. Water consumed from the proffered bowl, inscribed with Quranic verses, is also believed to have curative powers. Water also features in the ritual associated with the annual commemoration of Shahul Hamid's death anniversary, where the head of the shrine, ritually enacting the role of Shahul Hamid, proceeds to the ocean in an elaborate procession to break his fast. And these are images of this year's event from the shrine's website. The ritual saint then sips water from a hole right here. It is believed that at all other times this water is salty, but the spiritual presence of the saint on this occasion renders it sweet. This transformation reflects the miraculous powers of the saint and his control over nature. He then proceeds to the sea, paying homage to Khizr, responsible for giving Shahul Hamid grace. Nagaur is a site of pilgrimage, as popular posters attest. I met people who had come from Singapore, Malaysia, and distant places in India. 7 visits to Nagaur are said to be equal to 1 to Mecca. A paperweight, and here it is, if you don't believe me, I found at the shrine's many stalls features an image of the Kaaba together with the Nagaur shrine, visually reminding the pilgrim of the link between the two. In the paperweight, these 2 images are bound together by a watery fluid in which gold balls float, probably a reference to the special aura of each. The gold on the side of the Nagaur shrine may serve as a reference to Shahul Hamid himself, who is called the Aftab-e Nagaur, or the son of Nagaur. Not surprisingly, given the customs practiced at the shrine, the Nagaur shrine is visited equally by Muslims and Hindus, most of whom are seeking cures for ailments, barrenness, and safety with travel, because he's particularly associated with saving ships. Pilgrims offer to the shrine money, prayers, and sheets to cover the grave. Those who wish to be healed or secure safe journeys purchase plaques with an image of the afflicted body part, a ship, a car, or even these days, an image of an airplane, which they offer to the shrine. In pre-modern times, those about to take a sea voyage would make an offering to the shrine, and when returning, a ship representing Shahul Hamid would meet the voyagers as they approached the Nagaur port, taking from them monetary tribute that was 10 times the original offering. The favor that Shahul Hamid found was so great that when Indian merchants who came from the Tamil coast crossed the Indian Ocean and settled in the East India Company's new colonies in Southeast Asia, they then duplicated his shrines in 2 different venues. While not completely unheard of in the Islamic world, multiple shrines to a single saint are unusual, for shrines traditionally develop around a saint's burial site. Early in the 19th century, Tamil traders in Penang established a small shrine to the memory of Shahul Hamid. Then about 1830, a larger shrine to Shahul Hamid was being built in Singapore. Each of these shrines is called a dargah, that is, the site of a Muslim saint's grave. Yet no body is present, so we might ask, what do they represent? Those Tamil Hindus who settled in Southeast Asia brought with them their gods. In this same manner, Shahul Hamid's baraka was carried across the sea. The Penang Dargah serves as a memorial, as a sign in the complex indicates to Shahul Hamid. However, it's not just a memorial to him, rather it's to his karamat, that is his extraordinary power to perform miracles, which is a gift from God. The Singapore shrine was also a tribute to the saint's karamat. Archival documents indicate that Tamil traders were reluctant to return to India, in part because of the sea journey. Asking for protection to the intercession of Shahul Hamid, Tamil traders would stay in these shrines for 3 days before they commenced any sea voyage. Even if the Penang and Singapore shrines are dedicated to the saints' God-given powers, we still need to ask, is there a precedent for these multiple shrines when they are so rare in the Islamic world, although many Sufis have similar abilities? I believe that one answer is found in the vicinity of Nagaur itself. Saints often perform chilla, that is, they retreat to meditate for a 40-day period. The location of the chilla is sometimes known, although it usually remains a site of minor significance. However, Shahul Hamid's chilla has been turned into an independent shrine. It's right on the coast and marks the site of his meditations, during which he miraculously rescued sinking ships, and where sweet water is sipped during the commemoration of the saint's death anniversary. Here, large number of pilgrims come to experience the saint's powers, in spite of the fact that his body is not there. How do we explain this? That when in the Muslim tradition, power emanates from a saint's body, which is not considered dead, but living. A case in point is another nearby shrine I visited. Before I entered the tomb, the custodian first knocked loudly on the door to let the saint know he had a visitor. If the saint is treated as if he were still alive and has the extraordinary ability to perform miracles, why can't he be present in multiple places at once? This seems to be precisely what was in the minds of those Tamil Muslims who crossed the waters and settled first in Penang and then Singapore, and remains in the beliefs of their descendants. These two case studies, which focus on Indic water's uses of water conservation in the context of monumental architecture and religious ritual and belief, may seem to be very different in nature. One focuses on royal patronage, which was intended to elevate the lineage of a king who rose from obscurity, and the other on the lore associated with the long-deceased saint and his shrine. There are, however, threads that bind them. One is the role of water in each case. Both Sher Shah's architecture and the shrine of Shahul Hamid are providing water for the common man. Sher Shah's many bawlis, wells, and even the tank at his tomb are fulfilling the function of public works projects. Unlike Mughal gardens, which were intended solely for the consumption of the elite, Sher Shah's water architecture had a much wider audience serving its subjects. So too, the tank at Shahul Hamid's shrine was intended for public consumption by all Tamil society, not just Muslims. Moreover, we have seen that there is a political and economic role to the water architecture under Sher Shah and the Nagaur shrine. Each are part of larger irrigation systems whose failures would result in disaster. Sher Shah used water architecture to suggest his father had a saint-like status, and at his own tomb to suggest he, like a saint, possessed baraka as well. Water imagery permeates the shrine and persona of Shahul Hamid, promoting the message of his baraka. I think it's no small thing that in each case, Indic water traditions are promoted, for those are traditions that ensure water harvesting and conservation and are best suited to the terrain of the subcontinent. Thank you. Get rid of all that stuff.